Welcome back to True Echo, where everyday people become legends. Today's story is one of injustice, strength, and quiet power. It begins with a peaceful summer swim, a group of bullies, and a boy they thought was weak. But what they didn't know, was that the boy they tried to drown was a martial arts prodigy. What happened next left the whole pool in stunned silence. The heat in Tempe, Arizona, had a way of swallowing sound. It hummed over Escalante Community Pool like a heavy blanket, stifling, quieting the world beneath it. But even the weight of desert summer couldn't dim the joy echoing off the concrete as kids laughed, splashed, and played like freedom was something found in the deep end. Jalen McAllister stepped through the gate alone, towel slung over one shoulder, duffel bag in hand. His sandals slapped softly against the sun-baked pavement. He wasn't there to impress anyone. He wasn't trying to make friends, or enemies. He came for peace. For the silence just under the water, where the world didn't judge you for being quiet, or careful, or different. He nodded to the clerk at the front desk and scanned his membership tag. The teen barely looked up, too busy texting. Jalen didn't mind. He liked being invisible. He headed straight for the far corner of the pool, the one without floaties, without cannonballs, without noise. He sat for a moment on the edge, legs dangling. The surface of the pool shimmered like glass, and he took a deep breath, closing his eyes like he was centering himself. His grandpa always said to breathe before any challenge, before a test, a match, even before speaking. Jalen breathed in. Held it. Breathed out. Then he slid into the water. He moved like a whisper. Not flashy. Not loud. Each stroke smooth and controlled. Laps were his therapy. His dojo. And beneath the surface, there was no one to call him names. No one to corner him in hallways. No one to ask him why he was always so weird. 20 minutes passed, quiet and uneventful, until the piece cracked like glass under pressure. 3 boys strutted in through the gate. Loud, cocky, bigger than Jalen. 8th graders, maybe older. One with a messy blonde bowl cut and mirrored sunglasses that looked too big for his face. Another with braces that gleamed in the sun. The third, heavy-set, already sunburned across his neck. Blonde boy spotted Jalen first, meditating at the pool's edge. Yo, look at this dude. Is he praying to the chlorine gods or something? He called out, loud enough for everyone nearby to hear. The braces kid laughed. Hey, Bruce Lee Jr., what you doing? Training for the Olympics or just vibin'? Jalen didn't react. His gaze stayed on the water. Calm. Steady. The third boy nudged his friend and muttered, bet he can't even swim. That might have been the end of it, some immature noise, a few weak jokes, if they'd left it there. But silence, Jalen had learned, was like gasoline to certain boys. It didn't diffuse anything. It made them mad. Blondie kicked off his flip-flops and cannonballed into the pool like he owned it. The other 2 followed, splashing and yelling. Jalen tried to ignore them. He switched lanes, dipped underwater, and glided away like a shadow. But even shadows get chased. Hey! Blondie called again. Yo, Mr. Miyagi, we're talking to you. Jalen stood up in the shallow end, water dripping from his arms, his breathing controlled. I'm not bothering you, he said plainly. Let me swim. Blondie smirked. Too good for us, huh? I just want to swim. They closed in. Not playful. Not curious. Testing. Poking. Braces splashed water into Jalen's face. Oops. Sorry, man. Jalen wiped his face. Back off. Still no yelling. Just calm. And that might have been the most threatening thing of all. Because bullies? They want fear. Or anger. Something to fuel the game. But Jalen gave them nothing. So they tried to take everything. Blondie lunged first. A shove, hard and sudden, that sent Jalen falling backward into the water. He sank fast, the sting of the shove echoing in his bones. But he didn't flail. Didn't gasp. He floated for a moment, letting the water carry the heat out of his chest. He surfaced slowly. Only to be grabbed again, this time by the shoulder. Braces laughed. Let's see how long Ninja Boy can hold his breath. The three dunked him under together. It was chaos. Arms. Legs. Water. Fear flashed through Jalen's body, but only for a second. He remembered Grandpa Elijah's voice. Your first weapon is breath. If you lose that, you lose everything. So he held it. Not just his breath, but his rage. Then, slowly, he rose. Again. Not gasping. Not yelling. Just rising. And the moment he opened his eyes, everything changed. Water clung to Jalen's face like a second skin as he blinked beneath the sun, his chest heaving just once. He'd been under longer than they expected. Longer than most kids would last. But he wasn't like most kids. The three boys backed up a little, confused. Braces tried to brush it off. Man, relax. We're just playing, dot. Jalen didn't flinch. This isn't playing. Blondie tilted his head, his smile thinning. Oh yeah? You gonna do something? You gonna karate chop us, or just keep staring like some kind of monk? I said stop. It wasn't a threat. It wasn't a plea. It was a statement of fact, spoken evenly, with no fear. But the loudest boy is always the one who feels smallest inside. Stocky Kid lunged again, faster this time, trying to shove Jalen against the pool wall. But Jalen was already moving. He stepped sideways in the water, pivoting like he was born there. One hand brushed the kid's shoulder, just enough to redirect him. The momentum carried Stocky past him, crashing face first into the shallow end. A loud splash. A yelp. Silence. The crowd watching, the ones who had giggled earlier, suddenly sat up straighter. Jalen hadn't struck. Hadn't pushed. He'd moved like water. And water doesn't fight. It flows. Yo, someone whispered from the bleachers. Did he just judo that dude without touching him? Blondie didn't laugh this time. His sunglasses had slipped down his nose, and for the first time, his smirk cracked. Something in his instincts told him this wasn't the joke he thought it was. But insecurity is blinding. You think you're better than us? Blondie snapped, stepping forward. You want to act like some kung fu master, huh? I don't want anything, Jalen said, standing his ground. I just want to swim. Then maybe swim somewhere else. Blondie shouted, and with no warning, swung a wild arm at Jalen's face. It wasn't trained. It wasn't smart. Just anger. But Jalen didn't flinch. He stepped in, twisted his hips, and caught Blondie's wrist with his left hand, light, firm, just enough. A classic Aikido grip. One Grandpa had made him repeat hundreds of times. He held it for 2 seconds. Then let go. Blondie stumbled backward, thrown off balance not by force, but by the sudden realization that he was completely out of his depth. Stop trying to fight people you don't understand, Jalen said quietly. You'll hurt yourself. That's when the lifeguard finally looked up. Hey! What's going on down there? The teenager called, dropping his phone and grabbing his whistle. Blondie, eager to save face, turned fast. He grabbed me. The lifeguard looked between the boys, then at the other kids, wide-eyed, silent, all of them watching Jalen like he was something they'd never seen before. Jalen didn't argue. They dunked me, he said. 3 times. The lifeguard pointed at the trio. Out of the pool. Now. What? Are you serious? Braces protested. I said now. The three of them stormed out, muttering under their breath, dripping wet and bruised in pride more than anything else. One of them kicked a plastic chair hard enough to knock it over. But no one clapped. No one laughed. The pool had gone quiet. Jalen stood alone again in the shallow end, breathing steadily. Then a little girl whispered to her mom, loud enough for others to hear. He moved like a ninja. A nearby teen nodded slowly. He didn't even hit him. That's the crazy part. A woman, sun hat pulled low over her sunglasses, walked toward the pool's edge. You okay, sweetheart? She asked. Jalen looked up and gave a single nod. I'm fine. You want me to call somebody? Your mom? No, ma'am, he said. I'm good. He walked back to his towel, dripping, muscles tense, not from fear, but from restraint. He sat down, back straight, and sipped from his water bottle. Behind him, one of the bullies kicked a trash can on the way out. The crash echoed across the pool deck. Jalen didn't flinch. He closed his eyes. Breathe in. Breathe out. The hardest part wasn't the shove. Wasn't the water. Wasn't the humiliation. It was choosing not to fight back. It was knowing he could have thrown each of them down without breaking a sweat, but didn't. Because this wasn't just about winning. It was about being unshakable. The Arizona sun glared down like a spotlight as Jalen sat wrapped in his towel, damp but still. The sting of chlorine clung to his skin, but his mind had already drifted somewhere else, back to Santa Clarita, California. To a backyard dojo shaded by oak trees. To his grandfather's voice, deep and even, guiding his every move. You're not learning to fight, Grandpa Elijah used to say. You're learning how not to. Jalen had been 6 the first time his grandfather taught him how to fall. He didn't understand it then, why falling mattered more than punching, more than winning. But now, as he sat silently by the pool where moments ago 3 boys had tried to drown him, it made perfect sense. A lifeguard and a clerk whispered near the front desk. 2 moms gathered their kids quietly, eyeing Jalen with a mix of curiosity and new respect. The energy had shifted. No more jokes. No more snickers. People had seen something. They didn't know exactly what. But they knew it was real. As Jalen stood to gather his things, the slap of wet flip-flops behind him made him pause. He turned slowly. It was the kid with braces, Kenny. The one who laughed the loudest when it all started. He approached carefully, hands in his damp pockets, not meeting Jalen's eyes. Hey, Kenny muttered. Jalen stared at him. What? Kenny shifted uncomfortably. I didn't know Cole would go that far. I thought. I dunno. I thought you were just being stuck up or something. I didn't know. You laughed, Jalen said, his tone not accusing, just stating fact. I know. Kenny scratched the back of his neck, glancing around to see if anyone was watching. I figured you were gonna throw punches the minute we messed with you. That's why I didn't stop it. I thought you were just waiting. I told you to stop, Jalen said evenly. Twice. I heard you, Kenny admitted. His voice dropped to almost a whisper. I just didn't listen. Jalen looked at him, not with anger, but with something heavier, disappointment. Don't follow people who can't control themselves, he said. Kenny finally met his gaze. You don't have to be like them. Kenny's mouth moved like he wanted to respond, but nothing came out. Jalen hoisted his bag over his shoulder and walked away. He didn't need a mic drop. Didn't need to storm off. He just left. Sometimes the loudest goodbye is the one you never speak. Outside, the air was hotter than before. The sky streaked with amber. Jalen crossed the lot slowly, a lifeguard nodding to him as he passed, not with pity, but with recognition. The kind of nod that says, I saw. I get it. You handled it better than I would've. Near the curb, a father and son were unpacking towels from a beat-up minivan. The boy, maybe 7, froze when he saw Jalen. "Dad," he whispered. "That's the kid from the pool." The father glanced up and offered a half-smile. "You good, son?" Jalen nodded. "Yeah. I'm good." He kept walking. When he reached the corner, he paused, pulled out his phone, and looked at the wallpaper, an old photo of him and Grandpa Elijah, sitting on the porch in training uniforms, barefoot and beaming. He smiled slightly. Then texted his mom. "Headed home. Everything's okay." He slipped the phone back in his pocket, took one last breath of the desert air, and kept walking. No music. No applause. Just the crunch of his sandals on gravel. But sometimes, walking away is the most powerful move you can make. The next morning, his story was already spreading. Not from Jalen. He hadn't told anyone, not even his closest friends. When his mom asked how the pool was, he just said, "Weird day. I'm gonna hang out in my room." But in the digital world, silence doesn't last long. Someone had recorded part of the incident. Just a blurry clip, Jalen sidestepping the heavy-set kid, gently redirecting Cole's wrist, standing perfectly still while 3 boys scrambled around him like toddlers in a martial arts movie. It made its way onto Snapchat first. Then TikTok. Then Madison Middle School's group chat. Within hours, the video was titled, "Quiet Kid Flips the Whole Pool Without Throwing a Punch Skull Fire." The comments started rolling in. "Yo, he legit Bruce Lee FR. I thought he was quiet. Bro didn't even try. Just waterbend them skull. He straight Jedi moved that dude." By the end of the day, Jalen's name wasn't just floating around. It was being shared. But Jalen didn't care. He stayed quiet. He wasn't proud of what happened. He didn't want clout. He was just glad it hadn't gone worse. That no one got hurt. That he didn't lose control. That night, while flipping through one of his grandfather's old martial arts books, pages yellowed, corners bent from years of use, his phone buzzed. An unknown number. He let it go to voicemail. Then it buzzed again. He answered. "Hello." A pause. Then a voice, uncertain, low, familiar. Hey. It's Kenny." Jalen didn't say anything. He just listened. "I know you don't want to hear from me. I wanted to say it again. I'm sorry. Cole's been mad at everyone lately, and I followed his lead. That's on me." Jalen stayed quiet. Kenny kept going. "I showed the video to my cousin. He boxes. He watched it and said, 'That kid's trained. You're lucky he didn't embarrass you.' I didn't get it till I watched again." Finally, Jalen spoke. "It's not about impressing people. It's so I don't become like the ones trying to break me." Another pause. "You taught me something," Kenny said. "I'm gonna think about it." Click. The line went dead. No goodbyes. No back patting. Just enough. That night, Tempe's sky glowed deep orange, and the desert wind rolled in soft and dry as Jalen sat on his porch, the same way Grandpa Elijah used to, legs crossed, book in hand, mind settled. The journal resting on his lap was old, filled with handwritten notes in firm strokes. Grandpa never typed a thing. Said if your hands couldn't feel the words, your heart wouldn't carry them. On one page was a phrase underlined 3 times. "Power isn't what you use, it's what you don't." Jalen read it over and over. He thought about the pool. About Cole's red face when he couldn't break the grip. About the way Kenny's voice cracked on the phone. And how his own hands had remained still. It hadn't been easy. There was a moment, underwater, his head scraping the bottom, where every muscle in his body had wanted to explode. But he didn't. He'd held it in, held himself together, because that was the lesson. That was the strength. The next day, Cole's mom stormed into the community center. She barged into the front office, shouting about how her son had been assaulted, how the lifeguard had failed to intervene. Threatened legal action. Demanded someone be punished. The staff stayed calm. They reviewed the security footage quietly, played it back for her in a dim side room. They didn't say much. They didn't have to. The footage showed it all. 3 boys cornering one. A push. A dunk. Another dunk. The boy rising, still, saying little, reacting less. And finally, a wrist grab, gentle, controlled. Then release. Cole's mom didn't speak afterward. She just stared at the monitor, lips pressed together tight. Then she turned and left the building, yanking her son by the arm as he followed, eyes on the floor, defeated. But for Jalen, life didn't go back to normal. Not quite. By Friday, he noticed it at school, even though it was summer break. On social media. At the park. On the sidewalk. People stared longer. Whispered louder. Some nodded. Others asked questions. Yo, you do MMA or something? Is it like real karate? Or movie stuff? Dude, you're famous now. Jalen never said much. Just smiled slightly or shook his head. Because fame wasn't the goal. He hadn't earned anything. He had only endured. That weekend, Jalen returned to Escalante Pool. Same towel. Same sandals. Same quiet walk. His mom had asked him twice, "Are you sure you want to go back there?" He just nodded. "Nothing about me changed," he said. "Why should my routine?" He arrived at the same bench. Set down his things. The same lifeguard from before stood tall in his chair now, no phone in hand, more alert, more aware. When he spotted Jalen, he gave him a subtle thumbs up. Jalen returned a small nod. He walked to the pool's edge and knelt, touching the surface like it was sacred. He let his breathing settle, as Grandpa had taught. Then slipped into the water. The coolness wrapped around him like welcome silence. Nearby, parents glanced his way. 2 teens whispered. One mom whispered something to her daughter, who nodded quickly, eyes wide. But no one mocked him. No one challenged him. Until one did. A small one. A little boy, maybe 8 years old, wandered over from the kiddie pool, floaties on both arms and nose running. He stared at Jalen with huge eyes. "Hey," he said shyly. "My big brother said you know karate." Jalen turned, caught off guard. "It's jujitsu," he said. "And a little taekwondo." The kid nodded seriously. "Can you teach me how to flip people?" Jalen smiled. "That's not really the point of it." The boy squinted. "Then what's the point?" Jalen paused. "So people don't flip you." The boy seemed to chew on that, then broke into a big grin before running back to his mom, yelling something about the ninja kid. Jalen shook his head and smiled to himself. He stood, stretched, and walked back to the water. He slipped in again, smooth and slow, his stroke steady, unhurried. Not showing off. Just swimming like he always had. Near the deep end, he spotted Kenny again, this time with a new group of boys. They weren't laughing. They weren't pointing. Just watching. Kenny met his eyes and gave a subtle nod. Jalen nodded back. That was enough. No apology. No drama. Just a quiet bridge built over still water. Later, as he grabbed a juice pouch at the snack bar, the woman who had checked on him the week before stopped beside him. "You're a good example," she said softly. Jalen blinked. "I'm just a kid who likes to swim." "Exactly," she said. "And you should be able to do that, without someone trying to ruin it." He nodded once, then turned back toward the pool. Some parents still watched him. Some smiled. Some just stared. But the moment had passed. It wasn't a spectacle anymore. It was a memory. A lesson. A ripple that had already spread further than he could see. That night, Jalen sat on the porch again. A breeze stirred the trees. The heat had lifted slightly. The journal lay open in his lap. He traced his fingers across a note Grandpa had written years ago, beneath a sketch of a bowing fighter. The hardest battles are the ones you walk away from. Jalen leaned back, staring up at the stars. He knew this wasn't the last time he'd face something like that. The world was full of people like Cole. People who needed to push someone down to feel taller. But now, more than ever, he understood what made his grandfather so strong. Not the fists. Not the black belts. Not the trophies gathering dust in the old dojo. It was the silence. The breath between the storm. The decision not to break, even when breaking would be easier. The following Monday, Jalen's mom handed him a grocery list and some cash before she left for her shift at the clinic. It was just past noon, and the summer sun beat down heavy and hot, the kind of heat that made tires stick to the road and door handles burn like iron. As he walked the aisles of the local neighborhood market, a woman approached him near the produce section. She had on scrubs and a stethoscope around her neck, and her eyes lit up with recognition. "You're the boy from Escalante Pool, right?" Jalen froze for a moment, unsure what she meant. Then she smiled. "My niece was there. Said you handled some bullies like a monk. Told me the whole story, even showed me that video floating around. I just wanted to say," she paused, searching for the words. "You didn't just stand your ground. You taught my niece something about not sinking to people's level." Jalen gave her a soft smile. "I didn't do anything special." "That's what makes it special," she said, placing a hand on his shoulder briefly before walking away. The interaction sat with him longer than he expected. Not because it flattered him, but because of how fast the moment had spread. It wasn't just a pool incident anymore. It was something kids were retelling at sleepovers, something parents were sharing with lessons attached. Still, Jalen never corrected anyone. He didn't post the video. He didn't explain the philosophy behind what he did. Because it wasn't for them. It was something he owed to himself, and to his grandfather. Later that afternoon, he returned home to find a package waiting on the porch. No return label. Just his name in clean handwriting. He opened it cautiously. Inside was a simple black belt. Not an official promotion, not something granted by a school or federation. Just a well-made belt, folded neatly. And a note, typed on aged paper. "Not because you fought. But because you didn't. Elijah." Jalen stared at the note, breath caught in his throat. It was his mom's doing. It had to be. A keepsake from his grandfather, saved for the right moment. And this was the moment. He held the belt in both hands, then folded it gently and placed it on his dresser. He didn't wear it. Not yet. Maybe not ever. Because the power of it wasn't in wearing it, it was in knowing he didn't need to. That night, his mom sat down beside him on the couch, a bowl of fruit between them. "Heard there was a little activity at the pool," she said lightly. Jalen gave a small chuckle. "Little bit. You okay?" He nodded. "I didn't hurt anybody." She studied his face. "I know you didn't. But I could have," he said softly. "I wanted to. Just for a second." His mom nodded, eyes calm. "That's what makes me proud. Not that you didn't get hurt. Not even that you defended yourself. But that you chose when not to." Jalen looked down at his hands. "Grandpa once told me he spent so much time in that dusty old dojo because every hour he sweat in there, was one less drop of blood out here." His mother smiled and leaned back. "That sounds like him." They didn't say much after that. They didn't need to. Because the real impact of moments like this doesn't land right away. It comes slowly, in the quiet, like ripples across still water. By Wednesday, the story had made its way to a local online newspaper. A columnist had picked it up from a neighborhood blog. The headline read, "Teens' calm response to bullies at local pool leaves community speechless." It was light on detail, no names, no dramatic exaggeration. Just a quiet, respectful nod to a kid who didn't swing first. Who didn't swing at all. Just stood, breathed, and didn't fold. But the most surprising ripple came later that week. Jalen received an invitation, hand-delivered by one of the pool staff, to speak at the Escalante Youth Center the following Friday. They were hosting a summer safety event. The theme? Strength in stillness. Only if you want to, the staff member said. No pressure. Just a short talk. Or even a demonstration. Jalen hesitated. He wasn't used to crowds. Wasn't used to being listened to. But he thought of the boy with floaties. Of Kenny's apology. Of the nurse in the grocery store. And he realized, maybe this wasn't about him anymore. Maybe it was about what others could learn if he simply showed up. He accepted. That Friday, the gymnasium echoed with chatter and sneakers squeaking across the floor. About 50 kids and their parents filled the bleachers, fanning themselves with paper programs. At the front, a small mat had been laid out. Jalen stood beside it, heart racing. He wasn't there to flip anyone. He wasn't there to prove anything. He was just there to explain what his grandfather had always taught him, that strength wasn't about domination. It was about dignity. A staff member handed him the mic. He took a breath. "Hi," he began, voice low but clear. "I'm Jalen." A few kids nodded. Some smiled. "Most of you know something happened at the pool last week. And yeah, it wasn't fun." A few parents chuckled softly. "But it taught me something. Something I already knew, but needed to remember." He paused. "I could have fought back. I've trained for years. But training isn't just about learning how to hit. It's about learning when not to." He scanned the room. "My grandpa used to say, real strength is when you don't let someone else control who you become." That day, those kids tried to make me small. Tried to make me angry. And I almost let them. But instead, I remembered who I was. And that was enough. The room fell silent. One of the little kids in the front row raised his hand. "So, can you still do flips?" Jalen chuckled. "Yeah. But only when someone really deserves it." The crowd laughed. And for the first time since that day at the pool, Jalen let himself smile, not just with his mouth, but fully, deeply. Because this moment, wasn't about the bullies anymore. It was about the echo left behind. Later that evening, after the youth center event had wrapped, Jalen found himself sitting alone on the bleachers, watching the sun dip behind the basketball court outside the gym. The applause from his talk still echoed faintly in his ears, but he wasn't holding on to the claps. He was holding on to the silence that followed. The respectful kind. The kind Grandpa used to say was louder than cheers. The center's director, a tall man with salt and pepper dreadlocks and a clipboard tucked under his arm, sat down beside him. "You know," the man said, "we've been running this program for 8 years. Had ex-athletes come through, public speakers, even a local celebrity once. But the only time the whole room got quiet like that, was for you." Jalen blinked. "I didn't say much." "Exactly." The man smiled. "That's why it worked." They sat there a minute longer, nothing but the hum of cicadas and the distant sound of a basketball bouncing outside. "You ever think about teaching?" the man asked. "Me?" "Yeah. You. We could use someone who understands balance. Not just the physical kind." Jalen didn't say yes. But he didn't say no either. It was the first time anyone had ever asked him to lead something, not because he was loud, or popular, but because he was centered. Later, on the walk home, he took the long way through a quiet stretch of park where the evening wind danced through tall grass and streetlights buzzed gently. With each step, he felt the weight on his shoulders shift. Lighter. Steadier. He passed a group of teens sitting on a bench. One of them nudged the other and whispered, "That's him." From the video. Jalen didn't react. Just kept walking. He knew people would always whisper. About what he did. What he didn't do. What they thought he could have done. But the truth lived somewhere beyond the gossip. Beyond the clips and captions. It lived in the breath he took just before speaking. The silence he chose instead of a strike. The decision to be more than what they expected. When he got home, his mom was cooking dinner. The smell of garlic and rosemary filled the house, the radio played soft jazz in the background, and for the first time in days, everything felt normal again. "You hungry?" she asked, without looking up. "Starving." As they sat down to eat, she slid a small package across the table. "This came today. From Santa Clarita." Jalen raised an eyebrow. The return label was from his uncle, his grandfather's oldest son, the one who took over the dojo after Elijah passed. He opened the box slowly. Inside was a single folded envelope and a flash drive. The envelope contained a note, written in his uncle's tidy print. "Dad left this for you. Said to give it when you were ready. Looks like now's the time." Jalen turned the flash drive over in his hands, then excused himself to his room. He slid it into his laptop and waited as the file loaded. It was a video. Grainy, recorded years ago. Grandpa Elijah stood in the middle of the old dojo, barefoot, wearing a simple training gi. The camera wobbled slightly as he began to speak directly to it. "If you're watching this," Grandpa said, "it means you've been tested. Not in the way of tournaments or sparring, but life." Jalen leaned in. "I always told you, Jay, strength isn't the strike. It's the restraint. The choice to walk away is the real form. And if you walked away, if you stayed calm, then you passed the lesson." There was a long pause in the video. Grandpa looked off-screen, like he was imagining Jalen grown, watching years later. "I didn't raise a fighter. I raised a man who fights when he must. And only then. You make me proud, even now." The video ended. Jalen sat in the dark room, the screen casting a dim glow across his face. He closed the laptop slowly and let the silence settle around him. That night, sleep came easy. The next morning, as he approached the pool again, this time just for laps, he was stopped at the gate. It was the same lifeguard from before, the one who had ignored the first confrontation. But today, he stood tall, eyes alert. "Hey," he said. Jalen tilted his head. "I saw the whole thing now," the lifeguard admitted. "The footage, I mean. I should have stepped in sooner. I didn't. That's on me." Jalen didn't say anything. "But watching how you handled it, taught me something. I used to think being in charge meant barking orders. Or showing power. But it's really about showing control. So, thank you." He held the gate open. Jalen walked through without a word. Just a nod. Inside, the pool looked the same. Sunlight danced on the water. Chlorine hung in the air. Kids laughed and played as if nothing had ever happened. But something had. The ripple was still spreading. One kid noticed him and waved. Another whispered to her friend. But this time, Jalen didn't shrink from it. He wasn't just the quiet kid anymore. He was something else now. Someone others looked to, not because he could hit harder, but because he hadn't. He sat by the pool's edge, cross-legged, eyes closed, breathing in sync with the rhythm of the water. One breath at a time. One ripple at a time. His peace wasn't gone. It had only been tested. And it had passed. A week later, the Arizona heat hadn't let up, but something in the city felt cooler. Maybe it was just Jalen. He moved differently now, walked with the calm confidence of someone who had seen what he was capable of, and chosen not to use it. Saturday morning, just after sunrise, he visited the old dojo in Santa Clarita. His mom had driven them out to visit family for the weekend, and he asked for 1 hour alone. She didn't question it. The building hadn't changed. The bamboo floors creaked the same. The scent of old sweat, wood polish, and incense still lingered like memory itself. He stepped inside barefoot, bowing lightly toward the wall where Grandpa's framed black belt and portrait hung. For a moment, he didn't move. Just stood there, hands at his sides. Then he walked to the center of the mat. Breathe in. Breathe out. He began the warm-ups by instinct, every motion ingrained in his bones. His limbs moved slow, intentional. Every movement, a memory. Every breath, a lesson. And somewhere in his mind, Grandpa Elijah stood just behind him, silent, nodding. When the final kata ended, he knelt in the center of the room, sweat forming a thin sheen across his forehead. I kept my center, he whispered. The room said nothing in return. But he knew the answer. Back in Tempe the next week, Jalen returned to Escalante Pool. Summer was beginning to wane. A few schools were already posting their back-to-school banners. Kids screamed and splashed in their last gasps of freedom. He walked in like always, unbothered, towel on his shoulder, duffel in hand. But this time, he didn't head straight to the far lane. Instead, he walked past the shallow end and knelt by the kiddie pool. A small group of younger boys were horsing around with floaties. The same boy from before, the one who asked to learn flips, noticed him and waved eagerly. Hey, you came back. Jalen smiled. You remember what I said? The kid nodded. So people don't flip you. Right. He looked at the rest of the kids. Anyone want to learn how to fall without getting hurt? A few boys swam closer, eyes wide. You don't fight people unless there's no other choice, Jalen said. But when life knocks you down, you gotta know how to get back up. And just like that, he began teaching them simple rolls and postures, nothing aggressive. Just grounding. Balance. Breath. A few parents noticed. Watched from the benches. Some with curious eyes. Some with smiles. One lifeguard came over. You starting a class? Jalen shrugged. Just helping. Want us to set up a sign-up sheet? Jalen hesitated. Then nodded once. Sure. Word spread fast. Within a few days, a new program was listed on the Youth Center bulletin board. Martial Arts and Control, Sundays at 10. Instructor, Jalen McAllister. He never wore the black belt. He didn't need to. He wore board shorts, an old Escalante Pool t-shirt, and the same calm expression that had shaken 3 bullies without ever throwing a punch. Kenny stopped by once. He didn't say much. Just watched for a while, then left. But before he did, he dropped a folded note on the bench beside Jalen's duffel bag. It read. You changed how I see things. I'm trying to be better now. K. Jalen kept it. Not as proof, but as a reminder. Because that's what real strength is, what you leave behind. Not bruises. Not fear. But reflection. Growth. Echoes. Months passed. Fall arrived. The days grew shorter. But the pool never lost its shimmer. And Jalen never lost his calm. Some still whispered when he walked by, called him Ninja Boy, behind grins. But it didn't bother him. They could say what they wanted. He knew the truth. He wasn't a fighter because of what he could do. He was one because of what he didn't. Sometimes, the strongest warriors are the quietest in the room. Not because they lack power, but because they understand it. Jalen McAllister didn't fight to win the crowd. He didn't need revenge to prove his worth. He chose restraint. Control. Breath over brute force. And in doing so, he didn't just defend himself. He became the mirror that made others face themselves. So the next time you're pushed, mocked, or underestimated, remember, true power isn't how hard you strike. It's how calmly you stand when the world tries to make you fall. If this story moved you, if you believe the world needs more quiet strength and less loud hate, share this story with someone who needs to hear it. Leave a comment below. What would you have done in Jalen's place? Don't forget to like, subscribe, and follow us here at True Echo, where real power isn't loud, it's unforgettable.